Well, good evening. This is Rob Wood, pastor at the Wanda United Methodist Church, and welcome back. We're getting ready to do another one of our Wednesday evening Bible studies. And this evening we're actually working on Galatians chapter 5. We're going to talk some about Paul's fruits of the Spirit. And a couple things that I really wanted to talk about to begin with is... one, and you have to bear with me, I've got to take my glasses off to read it, even though I've got the bifocals. In chapter 5, Paul talks about things that are getting in people's way. They're looking at the ways of the world, if you will. He talks a lot about how anger and hatred and blind ambition and all these different things that are really getting in their way. As a matter of fact, in chapter 9 or verse 19 of chapter 5, he talks about what some of these things are. Some of the things that he talks about being of a sinful nature are, as he points out, obvious: sexual immorality, impurity and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissension, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. He lists quite a few things that Paul really kind of throws into the desires of the flesh. And I know a lot of times we talk about desires of the flesh and everybody automatically goes to the sexual immorality and the debauchery kind of side of things, but I thought especially right now, with so much of what we're going through in the world today, that these ideas of hatred and discord and jealousy and fits of rage and selfish ambition and dissension, the factions, these are all things that, in a lot of ways the world just throws right at us and kind of wants us to be on board with. It wants us to be angry. It wants us to be hateful. And that's not what Paul talks about as the fruits of the Spirit. And, one of the things that I was talking with a colleague earlier today, and we were talking about this idea, the way Paul kind of puts forth the idea of the fruits of the Spirit. And one of the things that I love about the fruit, the concept of the fruit, is if you think of, especially in Paul's time, when you were talking about a vineyard was not something that just poof happens. It's something that to produce really good fruit, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of work. And I think when we look at this idea of the fruits of the Spirit, they don't just magically happen. It's not like there's just all of a sudden, oh, I read these words and well, now I'm there and I'm good and I don't need to worry about anything else anymore. That's not really the way that it works. It requires effort. Really developing these fruits of the Spirit take a lot of work. And I'm going to go through where Paul in verse 22, and this again is from Galatians chapter 5, he says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control." Over the next several weeks, we're going to take time and we're going to go through each of these. Tonight, the very first one we talk about is love. And for many of you who, back when we first started doing our Wednesday night programming, we focused on the love verses. We talked about, love is patient, love is kind, and we broke each one of those things down. And I want to do the same kind of format with this. And one of the things that I really want to look at this evening, we're going to start off talking about love. Even though that is totally something that we have obviously talked about in the past. I just don't think there's any point where we can sit back and say, all right, we've talked about love enough. Because really the point of our faith is to love one another. As Christ commands, we are to love as he loved us, which is a incredibly difficult task. But as we sit down and we kick back and we think about, all right, what does that love mean? Well, sometimes, especially in today's world, that can kind of get kicked back up to some of those things that Paul told us were not necessarily so good. The ideas of sexual immorality, the ideas of debauchery, the orgies, things like that are things that obviously a lot of times the world wants us to put together as love, but that's really not what we're talking about. This is more of an agape love, that sacrificial, all-encompassing love that we have for each other. And as a fruit of the Spirit, this again is one of those things that we have to cultivate. We have to pick it up and work on it. I would love to be able to sit here and say, hey, you know what? Loving everybody is easy. Reaching out, everybody that you work with, everybody that you talk to, everybody that you see on Facebook, you can love them and it's all easy and good. And it's not. Relationships, marriages, they take effort. Love sometimes we may think of as being the easy part of it, but they still do take a huge amount of effort to keep that love in our hearts. When we think about loving people that we work with, I know, I struggle there sometimes too. That we really want to be able to look at and find that place where we can love each other. When we look at where we are politically in the world today, again, we can go back up to where Paul was talking about factions and hatred and discord and fits of rage, and understand that we are called to love each other. We can disagree. We can not always get along, but we have to be able to do it in a loving, compassionate, Christ-like manner. And I know that is not ever an easy task. So when we think about what these fruits of the Spirit are, one of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do is throughout the course of the next week, every day, just use it as kind of a little bit of a mantra for yourself. Fruits of the Spirit are love. Just start right there. If you can go through and get that first one, the rest of them become a whole lot easier. But it does take effort and work and patience with ourselves. Part of that love, part of that fruit of the Spirit, I believe, is also being able to love ourselves. Sometimes if we're not happy with who we are, it becomes almost impossible to be happy with anybody else. If we can't love who we are at our core, it makes it real hard to really love others. So as you go through the next week, and I encourage you, spend time, read through chapter 5. I mean, we're really going to spend several weeks on just a very small portion of Galatians chapter 5. Literally, it's verses 22. What's verse 22? 22 and 23. So we're talking about two verses that we're going to spend probably 8 or 9 weeks on. Just thinking about how do we develop, how do we grow, how do we cultivate that spiritual fruit in our lives. And where do we have to do some trimming? And some of the trimming, some of the hard work is going to be coming back a little bit further up there, and looking at these ideas of idolatry And idolatry, oftentimes we automatically think of, oh, well, I don't have a golden calf in my living room that I'm worshiping. At least I hope you don't. But it's not just the idea of having that golden calf or golden statue. I think really idolatry becomes one of those things that anything that gets between you and God, anything that disrupts the relationship you have with Christ, that can become an idol. Of course, everyone thinks, the big one obviously is money. We think about money a lot as an idol. But that's not the only one. It can be sports for some folks. I know lots of folks who I guarantee, can sit down and rattle off more statistics about sports than they can ever tell you anything about their own faith. And that's a situation. I'm not saying you shouldn't enjoy sports. I'm saying when you put it on such a level of importance in your life that it gets between you and God, or you know more about passing statistics than you do about faith, you need to kind of look at those things. There are a couple times in Scripture where one where a young man comes to Christ, and he's a wealthy young man, and he says, I want to follow you. And Christ says, well, sell everything you have and give it to the poor. It wasn't necessarily that Christ was against wealth, per se. In this situation, it was because that young man, the thing that was standing between him and that relationship with Christ, was in fact his possessions, his money. He walked away because he wasn't prepared for that. And now, I'm not necessarily saying right now you have to go out and sell all your belongings and give it to the poor. I am saying that you really do, I would highly encourage you to take a step back and think about, how much time do I invest in developing my fruits of the Spirit versus how much time I spend doing everything else. And I know sometimes we can go back in and say, well, what about work? I got to go to work so I can pay my bills. I get that. It doesn't mean that while we're at work, regardless of what your job is, that you can't also be spending time working and cultivating these fruits of the Spirit. As a matter of fact, that's one of the best places you can do it. Because as you build on this, as you develop this, as you work on this, it gets easier. Notice I didn't say it gets easy. I said it gets easier. It's one of the things that I have found very much so about my own faith. A lot of these things are not ever easy. Are they easier today than they were a decade or so ago when I got saved, when I became born again? Absolutely. Absolutely. Doesn't mean you're easy. I still fall short. I fall short daily. There's probably a few people who are watching this video that can tell you times that they've seen me fall short. I wouldn't pretend otherwise. But I hope you take the time and come back and join us. We're going to shoot for Wednesday evenings at 5:30. We're only going to go for about 15 minutes or so. And I just want you to take the time to spend your week and cultivate these spiritual fruits. See what a difference they can make in your life. Prune out those weeds of anger, hatred, faction, fits of rage, and develop the growth of love, patience, kindness. But right now, start hard. Work hard on love. Work hard on where in your life you can find ways to, one, express love, accept love, and that can be a hard one. And find ways to try and let your light shine to others. How awesome would it be if we could all really take away those things that Paul talks about as part of the flesh. Imagine the world we would live in right now if love, patience, kindness, self-control were the norm and not the exception. Imagine where we would be if those things were the goal of every human being on this planet. Can you imagine the wonders we would see? I imagine it would be starkly different than what we see today. So I thank you for joining me this evening. I know some of you were with us for a while when we were doing the love verses, and I'm thrilled to have some of you back. I'm thrilled to have all of you back. For those of you who just kind of stumbled across it, I hope you're able to join us again next week. I am also filming this for YouTube. I will fully admit I am not real tech savvy, so as we put a lot of these things together, I can pretty much guarantee you I'm going to screw them up. But we will do our best, and hopefully you enjoy it. If you have any questions, anything, you can email me at achurchcalledwanda@hotmail.com, or you can just post here on my Facebook page. And anything that you might have, shoot me an instant message, whatever. I may not answer right away, but I'll get to it as soon as I get a chance. So with that, I would say thank you again, and have a blessed week. Good night.